Radio Voice Italia.
Philadelphia.
Class is now in session. Christopher Columbus University is on air from Philadelphia and broadcasting worldwide from within the shadow of Marconi Plaza. Radio Voice Italia is proud to present a recurring segment with civil rights author, professional researcher, and renowned Christopher Columbus expert, Robert Felix Petrone, Esquire.
Buongiorno tutti and welcome to Radio Voice Italia's Christopher Columbus University, where we teach you the truth about the greatest hero of the 15th and 16th centuries, Christopher Columbus, and update you on the international efforts to preserve Christopher Columbus's legacy. I'm your host, il professore, Robert Petrone. Today on our Christopher Columbus University segment, we have some news updates. In Augusta, New Jersey, the statue of Christopher Columbus that former New Jersey State House photographer and White House photographer Ace Alanya had erected in Newark, New Jersey, but which Mr. Alanya's son-in-law preemptively put into storage to spare from Newark's Marxist mayor Ras Baraka's bigoted campaign of damnatio memoriae against Italian Americans and Christopher Columbus, will now be proudly re-erected and unveiled in Augusta's Skylands Park at a festival at which the park's minor league baseball field, the location of the baseball stadium used by St. Louis, Missouri's minor league team, will be renamed Columbus Field after the great Genoan explorer and first civil rights activist of the Americas, Christopher Columbus. You can read more about the unveiling of Newark's Columbus statue in its new location in Augusta, New Jersey, and the renaming of the baseball field in the Italian Tribune, now owned and operated by Mr. Alanya's son-in-law, former New Jersey General Assemblyman, chairman of the Committee on Independent Authorities and Commissions, and vice chair of the Transportation and Communications Committee, Buddy Fortunato, at the Tribune's website, ItalianTribune.com, and searching for the term Columbus in the search box. That's Italian Tribune, rendered as one word, .com. In New York City, the Conference of Presidents of major Italian-American organizations continues to offer well-crafted brochures titled Why Columbus Matters, pamphlets and signs for Italian-Americans to, quote, set the record straight on Columbus, and a 7-foot Christopher Columbus pop-up display to help you debunk the slander against Columbus and teach the truth about this great hero. The pamphlets and signs are free to all organizations, lodges, and clubs, as are up to 200 of the brochures, plus free shipping. The Columbus pop-up displays are $200 a piece. To order your Columbus pop-up or your free brochures and pamphlets, email your request today to the main office at it.am.presidents@gmail.com. That's it, like Italian, .am, like American, .presidents, that's plural, at gmail.com. Be sure to include in your offer the full name of your organization, lodge, or club, its mailing address, including zip code, and the items and quantity desired. In Westborough, Massachusetts, the Select Board has recommended a listening session that is being organized by 2 of its board members and hopefully with Westborough residents. The listening session has already been rescheduled for November and may well be rescheduled again for next year. In the meantime, the Residents Committee and the Knights of Columbus of Westborough are still collecting petition signatures opposing the proposal of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to exclude Italian Americans by replacing Christopher Columbus Day with the misnomer Indigenous Peoples Day. 4 Westborough residents made excellent 3-minute presentations at the August 24th board meeting. The Italian American Alliance of Westborough has been conducting Zoom meetings with residents for 6 weeks, helping them prepare for that board meeting, and have filed a Freedom of Information Act request for email correspondences of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee and the Select Board, which provided very enlightening information that helped to expose the lack of transparency of those bodies. The Italian American Alliance also sent letters to the Select Board upon first hearing of this act of damnatio memoriae back in July of 2021 and expressed its disagreement with the proposal. Its letters prompted the locals to reach out to the IAA, which then implemented a grassroots call to action campaign to push back on the committee's slanderous lies about Christopher Columbus, going as far as to send 3 books about Christopher Columbus to the board, who admitted that they needed more time to familiarize themselves with the topic. or at least that's what they claim to be doing with the delay. Pay close attention to that little act, listeners, because I'm going to suggest you do that at the end of this program. Also, the Grand Lodge of the Order of the Sons and Daughters of Italy in America worked wonderfully with Westborough's Italian-American Alliance to create a unified front with the Westborough Committee for Columbus. Such grassroots campaigns are the only way to stop these radical Marxist board members from taking such sanctimonious and misguided positions against the important national holiday of Christopher Columbus Day and the man who was a true hero, not only to Italians, but also to the world. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Councilman Mark Squilla is seeking Italian folk visual arts performers, such as Italian folk dancers and Italian folk instrumentalists, to join the ranks of the many singers who will be performing in the Philadelphia 2021 Christopher Columbus Day Parade on Sunday, October 10th along Broad Street. If you are a performer or impresario of Italian folk visual art performance, such as Italian folk dance or Italian folk music instruments, please contact the office of Philadelphia City Councilman Mark Squilla by phone at 215-686-3458 or 215-686-3459. That's 215-686-3458 or 59. Or by fax at 215-686-1931. That's fax number 215-686-1931. Or lastly, by U.S. Postal Mail at City Hall, room 332, Philadelphia, PA 19107. And let his staff know you are interested in participating in the Columbus Day Parade and Festival. The schedule for Columbus Day weekend in Philadelphia is as follows. On Friday, October 8th, the raising of the Italian flag outside the municipal building across North Penn Circle from City Hall. The resolution ceremony and lunch will follow in City Council's chambers. And on Sunday, October 10th, there will be a Mass at 10 o'clock a.m. at St. Monica's Catholic Church. The parade commences at 1:15 p.m. at Broad and Snyder to Broad and Oregon. And the festival begins at noon until 6 p.m. Channel 6 ABC News will broadcast from 2 o'clock to 3:30 p.m. There will be plenty of police at the parade. Councilman Mark Squilla is making sure of that. For the substantive portion of today's class, we have a very special guest. Now, in the previous class, I gave you a new reading assignment, the book Debunking Howard Zinn, Exposing the Fake History That Turned a Generation Against America by Dr. Mary Grabar. Today, on our program, we have with us none other than the author of that book, and the author of a new book as well, Debunking the 1619 Project, Exposing the Plan to Divide America. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the brilliant, erudite, and prolific Dr. Mary Grabar. Dr. Grabar, welcome, and thank you so much for being a guest on Radio Voice Italia's Christopher Columbus University.
Well, thank you for having me and that great introduction. Boy, that's going to inflate my ego.
Well, Dr. Grabar, so you were born in communist Yugoslavia, but you grew up in Rochester, New York. What, if anything, do you remember about your early life in Yugoslavia?
Well, I don't remember anything because I was only 2 years old when my parents escaped across the border into Austria and were then in a refugee camp for 9 months. But I did hear many stories around the table on Sunday afternoon from my parents, my aunts and uncles, and friends that would come over. They were stories about escaping deprivation, food. The communists would take a certain portion from these peasant farmers. Hiding hogs that they had to slaughter in the middle of the night because they only allocated one for a family, which would be not enough to feed the family, having preferential treatment given to communists, the Communist Party members in the village, just all kinds of, injustices and unfair treatment. And then when I was 12 years old, we went back for a 6-week visit in 1969, and it was still under Tito's rule. And although it was a gentler form of communism, it, compared to other countries like, say Poland or something, still I noticed that, none of my relatives had indoor plumbing, much less appliances, no cars, rode bicycles. 1969, I came back and I really appreciated toilets when I came back, indoor plumbing. but a few people did, and they were the Communist Party members. And my father, would ask my uncles in their own homes, what was life like? What was the political situation? And they were afraid to talk about that. Now, for someone who, has spent 10 or 12 years in America, where you can say whatever you want, that was quite a shock to me. And I remember those little things. So, growing up, having parents who are immigrants from a communist country, you have a different sensibility. There is anxiety about shortages of food, whether you're going to have money. I mean, I think that's sort of the common immigrant experience, but especially under communism, there's that fear that the communist regime can arbitrarily take things away from you, including food to live on.
Yeah. Now, after achieving your doctorate from the University of Georgia and teaching at several American universities, you wrote widely on political, cultural, and educational topics. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was, I went back to school, went to graduate school in the 1990s, and sort of made my way by aligning myself with the older professors who weren't getting into the crazy stuff that I was already seeing in English departments. And so I started seeing the corruption from inside and started writing about it for places like Town Hall or Pajamas Media, as it was called, trying to alert the public to what was going on. So things like, multicultural math were being discussed, right? I mean, now it's, people, several years ago were like, oh, come on, that's just a few kooky professors. But now it's really entered the mainstream. So as a result of doing that, I was teaching as a part-time instructor. So I had contracts from semester to semester, no tenure, so had no job security. And when department chairs or college presidents got wind of what I had written, all of a sudden there were no more classes for me the next semester. So that happened to me twice and I was canceled. And so in the course of doing that in 2008, I did come across Howard Zinn.
Yes. Now, okay, so you rose to fame in 2019 with the publication of this long-awaited book titled Debunking Howard Zinn, Exposing the Fake History That Turned a Generation Against America. And this was after you had founded the Dissident Prof Education Project, a nonprofit reform initiative, and you had moved to Clinton, New York, and became a resident fellow at the Alexander Hamilton Institute for the Study of Western Civilization. I assigned to my listeners to read Debunking Howard Zinn, Exposing the Fake History That Turned a Generation Against America in the previous episode of Christopher Columbus University. And I read the book. I love the book. In an author's note, an introduction, and 9 succinct, well-written chapters, you expose this charlatan, Howard Zinn, and his sourceless anti-American polemic. And it has been, his book, The People's History of the United States, has been adopted worldwide, but most disturbingly by the United States educational industry, as I like to call it, as a go-to source for the current trend of anti-American history instruction in not only our universities, but also in our high schools and our grade schools. Can you please tell my listeners, how in God's great earth did that tragedy happen?
Well, the ground had been prepared for Howard Zinn, and he also helped prepare the ground. So Howard Zinn was born in 1922, and when he was a teenager in the 1930s, he was lured over into the Communist Party by these members that came into his Brooklyn neighborhood and became a member of the Communist Party in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And so even though he did earn a PhD in history and wrote a respectable dissertation that was turned into a book on the congressional career of LaGuardia, he also, used his writing skills to present an updated version of a common communist rewriting of American history that began with Engels and went on to William Z. Foster, that presented the discovery of America as something that was done by a man motivated by capitalistic greed. And so everything subsequent to that so-called discovery is sort of a furtherance of that initiative. But when Zinn came along, so he's a bit older than the New Left, the 1960s generation, right? And so he was sort of an inspiration for them, a mentor. So in 1969, there was this famous meeting at the American Historical Association, and there was this vote taken up about, historians, what should their mission be? Should they remain objective, true to the evidence, or should they be activists, try to change society through the writing of history? And Howard Zinn, of course, was one of the ones who wanted to take that activist, use that activist mission as the new one. And so we have that in the 1960s, this kind of leftist rewriting of history with the aim of, ending racism, classicism, sexism, and all those things. And Howard Zinn just kind of tagged on to it. And by the time he was writing A People's History of the United States in the late 1970s, this was becoming accepted. He took it further. He really ran with it. It's not just sort of infused with leftism, but it's a sort of well-crafted rewriting of the standard communist histories of America that would have gained the approval of his one-time communist boss, William Z. Foster. So he's at the forefront, but he's also sort of piggybacking onto it, and just really an evil genius in terms of marketing and knowing the timing and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so you pinpointed the pivotal moment in the 1960s where our universities went from educational institutions to indoctrination camps. It's unbelievable. And you demonstrate in your book, and indeed in this interview, that you know a lot about Zinn and also about his friend, Hans Koning, whose sourceless polemic Columbus, His Enterprise, Zinn liberally plagiarized in writing his sourceless polemic, The People's History. Now, we will get to your new book, Debunking the 1619 Project, Exposing the Plan to Divide America, in a few minutes, but I know my listeners are very interested in hearing about your previous book, Debunking Howard Zinn, because after all, this program is titled Christopher Columbus University. They are hopefully reading it as assigned, and the first and third chapters of Debunking Howard Zinn regard, respectively, Zinn's jaundiced take on Columbus's story and on the treatment of the tribal peoples of both North and South America. Can you tell us, in your own words, you've told us who Howard Zinn is, but you mentioned in Debunking Howard Zinn, let me focus on this, that aside from plagiarizing Hans Koning's sourceless polemic, Columbus, His Enterprise, and lying about his own teaching credentials, Zinn violated each and every one of the American Historical Association's standards of professional conduct in penning a people's history. So can you please tell us in your own words about that?
Yes, well, first of all, plagiarizing, and that's something that I would have failed any of my college students for. I had a few tragic cases of plagiarism, copying another person's words or slightly modifying them and then presenting them as your own. That could get you expelled from college, even at the community college where I was teaching at one time. So we all know that. Anyone who has taken a freshman composition course, Zinn does that. He selectively quotes, leaves out critical information to distort the evidence from his source. So by the time he's done quoting someone, that source is presented as saying the opposite of what his intention was. He doesn't cite his sources very well. There are no footnotes. There's just a vague bibliography. He mentions people once in a great while, but he doesn't give credit. He makes things up. He just lies. He lies about what happened, and he leaves out big chunks of information that would provide the context. Just like, if you see, video of police, looks like they're beating someone up. And if you have no idea of what happened before, right, you call, that's what Zinn does throughout his book. So on every single page, there is a violation, at least one violation of these standards that are posted at the American Historical Association website.
Yeah, that's just disgraceful what he did. And, in explaining who Zinn was and your pinpointing of that moment that his part in the altercation, the alteration of the educational system to an indoctrination system, and then all of these examples of his violations of the standards of professional conduct, you really support your statement in Debunking Howard Zinn, where you blame him for what you call, quote, the decline in history writing, teaching, and knowledge. So I think that you make it very clear how he really did that, almost, not single-handedly, but almost in the vanguard of that campaign. Now, not only did Zinn lie and cheat in his professional career, he was an adulterer who lied and cheated on his own wife. So, as we say in the legal profession, falsum in uno, falsus in omnibus. What did Zinn say in his book, A People's History, that is so false about Christopher Columbus?
Well, he said that Christopher Columbus was motivated by capitalistic greed, that he took part in raping and pillaging and enslaving these gentle, what he called Arawak Indians, that he began the slave trade, and that, he did all this with this kind of glee, with this enjoyment. And so he presents him also as being a leader of men who do this and basically demolish this whole civilization. And they do it intentionally just for the goal of getting gold, and they're motivated by capitalism, and that sort of sets the pace for the rest of American history, which is based on capitalistic greed.
Indeed, and you point out that the impressionable youths who were subjected by the American educational industry to Zinn's lies in the 1980s and 1990s are now the socialist legislators and political influencers of the 2020s, which, as we are seeing, has proven disastrous. And it's happening all over again in our schools with the next generation. So you have recently written a new book, Debunking the 1619 Project, exposing the plan to divide America. Can you tell us very briefly, because we're running a little short on time, what is the 1619 Project and its basic premise?
Well, the basic premise is that this country was not founded in 1776. It was in 1619 with the arrival of the first Africans on a privateering ship. And so the similarity to Howard Zinn is that this country is basically founded on slavery. The 1619 Project says that this country is a slaveocracy. That's the reason why it was founded. That's what provided this country its wealth. It would not exist without the slaves. It was built on the backs of slaves. And the legacy of slavery is still with us, and hence we need reparations. We need to understand this through critical race theory, and and we need to look at each other through the lens of race, which is what critical race theory is.
Right, and it's funny because even the terminology that this 1619 Project coins, or at least borrows, from similar ideologically possessed works, is ignorant and opposite speak. They use the term slaveocracy, which if you break that down, ocracy means rulership by whatever, the prefix is that precedes it. And in this case, prefix is slaves. So they're even using a term that would technically mean rulership by slaves, which is just idiocy. But anyway, is this 1619 Project just a fringe narrative, or has it received as warm a welcome from America's educational industry as Zinn's work has?
Oh, even more so. So Zinn started off slowly, and this project was immediately put into schools, 3,500 schools. The ink was barely dry on the special issue of the New York Times Magazine. And so there were Quizlets, discussion questions, passages given to teachers, and there's been a whole industry, educators and educrats who are, luring teachers with grants, encouraging them to come up with their own lessons. Maybe they learned from Howard Zinn, have all the materials ready.
Yep, the Zinn Education Project was definitely their model, that is for sure. And you explain a lot of this in your book, Debunking the 1619 Project. And what about the mainstream media and popular culture? What have they done to promote this bunk?
Oh, it's been taken up. Kamala Harris tweeted out that this was a true history, that America was built on the backs of slaves. During the Oscars, there was a commercial. This actress, Janelle Monáe, was by the Port Comfort where this ship had purportedly had come in. Oprah Winfrey is producing a documentary about it. She's produced short videos. Hollywood is behind it. The creator of the project has been profiled in Glamour magazine, the Washington Post, all the left-wing magazines. Her beauty tips are advanced or skincare. It's really kind of funny how they have sort of elevated her to this celebrity.
Yeah, funny in a sad, tragic sort of way. And there's a whole coalition of liars out there pushing this. Are you alone in debunking it?
No, a number of historians on the left as well as the right, mostly on the left, actually came out. Sean Wilentz was, I think, first out of the gate. Leslie Harris, who had been hired as a fact checker and disputed the claims that were being made, revealed this in a Politico magazine. There were letters to the New York Times editor signed by Gordon Wood and Sean Wilentz and others. Alan Guelzo has, the Princeton historian, has come out against it. So there were, dozens who attacked it on its major points, mostly about whether or not we declared independence in order to protect the institution of slavery, which is way out of left field and, so outrageous that even those sympathetic to her had to come out and correct that in print.
Yeah. Now, I've read Debunking the 1619 Project, and I could say I'd be very surprised if anyone else has done as thorough a job as you have in exposing the lies of the 1619 Project and its insidious, divisive plan for America. From your opening chapters exposing the race hustlers behind the project, like Ibram X. Kendi and Nicole Hannah-Jones, and how they launched this invidious pack of lies, which you poetically characterize as, quote, neither new nor true, to your closing chapter titled Choosing Resentment or Freedom, which I find to be an ode to the very Western idea of how one's focus determines one's reality. And, in reading your book, it becomes very clear why the 1619 Project is so pernicious to Western culture. And therefore, what inspired you, it becomes very clear as to what inspired you to write these two books, Debunking Howard Zinn, Exposing the Fake History That Turned a Generation Against America, and Debunking the 1619 Project, Exposing the Plan to Divide America. Now, in that final chapter of Debunking the 1619 Project, which you call Choosing Resentment or Freedom, which I found particularly poignant. In fact, I read a good portion of it to my own children. You insightfully write, quote, The 300-year anniversary of 1619 was commemorated in 1919, but in those tercentenary commemorations, Black Americans celebrated the phenomenal progress that had been made since, rather than damning every advance in freedom since that date. End quote. Very well put. So let me ask you, Doctor, in your estimation, what changed from 1919 to 2020?
Well, there was the installation of the Communist Party in New York City in 1919, and Lenin gave orders to his lieutenants there to use the issue of race. It was a weak point. We all have to admit that, because there was Jim Crow. This was the height of the KKK. And he gave orders to exploit that. And it has been the technique of the far left, of the Marxists and the neo-Marxists. And this is just another reiteration of that, to look at the flaws of America and to refuse to acknowledge that anything had ever changed. You would think that we had not had a civil rights movement, that we had not had civil rights laws, sweeping civil rights laws instituted at the federal level. All of that is obscured. It's as if the people in 1919 felt themselves more fortunate than the creators of this project in 2019, who have tenure, great jobs, all the luxuries of modern life. So right. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And see, this is why your book is so insightful and poignant, because you have this incredible capacity to pinpoint, like almost to the year, these watershed events in American history where the Marxist ideology has gained traction. And so, you talked about that earlier when you talked about what happened, that vote by the Historical Commission, and then in the universities, and now this event in 1919, these orders by Lenin in 1919. This is amazing, and your book is chock full of this kind of stuff. As an escapee of an oppressive communist regime, a learned historian of Western culture, and a keen critic of the critical theory that has poisoned our educational system, what, in your estimation, Doctor, can be done about these troubling social trends?
Well, I think just having an informed citizenry and to fight these propagandists with facts. And that's why I wrote these two books, because, there's been a lot of criticism of Howard Zinn from people who can see that he hates America, that he's a Marxist, and little jabs and articles, but not a comprehensive sort of taking apart of what he is saying and revealing what was true. And the same thing with the 1619 project. You can go through the internet and spend days, literally looking up all these articles, and there's still stuff that's been missed, such as, the fact that slavery was in existence, the whole world over in 1776, except in Western Europe, practices in Africa, the fact that there were Black slave owners. I add that in my book, which others have not really treated. And so I go into detail. I also use a number of the great Black historians we've had, John Hope Franklin, Carter Woodson, and include those. And so what I want, there's a lot of emotion that has been stirred up, understandably, by, imposing the 1619 project in schools without any kind of vetting, any kind of parent approval. And people are understandably upset. But I want them to have a tool, a resource, a weapon when they go and they speak to their school boards, their elected representatives, teachers, administrators, to have the information and to point out, hey, it's wrong here, it's wrong there. And as I've said before, I would object to any kind of wrong history if there was a history book that said that slavery was just a walk in the park, I would object to that too, because slavery, of course, was, usually cruel and inhumane. So we need something that sticks to the facts, and we need to get these, these fictional works that are taught as history out of the classroom.
Right. Yeah. And you do that with Debunking the 1619 Project and with your previous book, Debunking Howard Zinn. They are, in my estimation, great opuses. And I, for one, await with great anticipation your future opuses, Dr. Grabar. You are a faithful hero of the truth and a true champion of Western culture. And for that, I am greatly honored that you appeared on Christopher Columbus University today. I hope this won't be the last time.
Oh, me too. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And listeners, please be sure to purchase, if you haven't already, Dr. Grabar's books, the first of which I assigned you to read in our last class, Debunking Howard Zinn, Exposing the Fake History That Turned a Generation Against America, 13-digit ISBN number 978-162-157-7737. That's 978-162-157-7737. And also her second book, her new book, which is just as easy to read, Debunking the 1619 Project, Exposing the Plan to Divide America, ISBN number 978-168-451-1778. That's 978-168-451-1778. It's already late September as we record this. The Christmas season is right around the corner. These books will make great gifts for your teenaged and 20-something relatives who are, as we speak, having their minds poisoned by Marxist critical theory in high schools and colleges, and as an anonymous gift to your children's history and English teachers. So Dr. Grabar's books are some powerful medicine. Be sure to buy them wherever books are sold. And that's today's class. For more news, articles, and resources about Christopher Columbus as the first civil rights activist of the Americas, icon of Western culture, paragon of Catholic virtue, and greatest hero of the 15th and 16th centuries, visit preservecolumbus.us. That's Preserve Columbus, rendered as one word, .us. And post a little note of appreciation for our webmaster, Tom LaCosta. I'm il professore Robert Petrone. A presto!
Live on Broad Street, it's the 2021 Philadelphia Columbus Day Parade, Sunday, October 10th. The Grand Marshal is Joe Piscopo. Join a cast of thousands featuring 10 string bands and 40 bands and performers. The parade commences at 1:30 p.m. at Broad and Snyder and proceeds to Marconi Plaza at Broad and Oregon. The Italian Festival at Marconi Plaza begins at noon and runs until 6 p.m. WPVI TV Channel 6 ABC will broadcast live from 2 to 3:30 p.m. It's the 2021 Philadelphia Columbus Day Parade, Sunday, October 10th. The parade starts at 1:30 p.m. at Broad and Snyder and concludes at the announcement stage at Marconi Plaza at Broad and Oregon Avenue. The Grand Marshal is Joe Piscopo.